Hey, welcome back. My name is Rainer, and this is the weekly market analysis. So each week, I usually put out trading ideas. I'll talk about trades I'm in, trades that I cut loss, trade I'm managing, as well as a little bit of psychology each week. So we do a little bit of everything, just in the hope that you get to understand what trading is all about. And this week, I'll talk a little bit more about the dollar index itself, because I would say traders has been asking me what I think about the dollar index. So I would like to share with you on how to better interpret the dollar index, because it's actually heavily weighted towards the euro. So you want to be actually a little cautious about how you use the dollar index. So this week we'll talk about the dollar index, we'll talk about the different currency pairs, and yep, that's about it. So see you there. Okay guys, so this is the chart of dollar index, alright? If you go to tradingview.com, tradingview.com, they give you a lot of end of day data across quite a number of markets, alright? They have stocks, they have futures, they have commodities, and even the dollar index. So I think for traders who are looking for another platform which is free to check out the different charts or the different markets out there, tradingview.com provides, I would say, a pretty comprehensive list. So right now I'm looking at the chart of dollar index, so the symbol is DXY. So I think I have a few traders asking me, Rainer, what do you think of the dollar index? So I figured, it's a good time to actually share with you my views. But first thing first, alright, you have to know that a dollar index, alright, it is based on a basket of currencies, and the heaviest weightage currency on the dollar index is actually the euro, with weightage of about 57%. So what that means is that the dollar index and the euro, they are pretty much negatively correlated to a certain extent. So if the euro dollar were to, I would say, drop by quite a bit, you can expect the dollar index to rise by quite a bit, because the weightage of the euro in the dollar index is about 57%. So you can actually expect a negative correlation between the two. So looking at the dollar index now, so we see that, it has been a very strong steady uptrend. That one is, I would say, no doubt about it. Since sometime in June, I think that is June last year. So we see a series of higher highs, higher lows, and this is actually I would say, could potentially be a turning point. We see this strong impulse move higher, then we see this retracement, then we see another move higher, but it fails to even retest the previous resistance once more. Then it traded lower, tried to do another push, but it failed to even rally any higher, and finally we had this strong impulse move towards the downside. And also it took out this key support level over here. So right now, price is actually into this previous resistance, now acting as support. So price is actually at this level at here once more. So it is actually quite a key level, right? But we have actually see background weakness on the dollar index, right? We saw how price failed to retest the resistance, and after which, right, it's had this slight lower. So this is a little bit of background on the dollar index, alright? I'm not really too bullish on it, but also at the same time, do take note that, partially this is due to the fact that, the euro dollar is actually doing quite a bit of rally in the recent weeks. So it's no surprise that the dollar index would actually slump in the last few weeks. So let me explain more on this correlation between the two. So this is the chart of the euro dollar weekly chart. So let's look at the daily, right? So notice earlier, dollar index, we had this slump over here. And if you look at the euro dollar, it's no surprise that you have this sharp rise over here. Because like I've said, the euro is the heaviest weightage currency in the dollar index, 57%. So they have this negative correlation going on. So just because the dollar index is showing sign of weakness doesn't mean the dollar is actually very weak, because you still need to look across the other basket of currencies, alright? Those which are not so heavily weighted, like the Aussie dollar, the pound dollar, the New Zealand, as well as the dollar yen. So this will actually give you a more complete picture rather than just looking at the index itself. So something to take note of. And looking at the euro dollar daily chart, notice that finally, right, after months, price broke out of this 50 period moving average, as well as this resistance over here. So likewise, right, on the dollar index, right, what you saw earlier when euro dollar took out the resistance, dollar index took out this support over here. They are pretty much negatively correlated, like I've said. So looking back at the charts, sorry for going back and forth, alright, hope I don't got you dizzy down there. So looking back at the chart, euro dollar, what's next for euro dollar? I would say, right, things are looking interesting, because we have not seen price trading above the 50 EMA for quite a while, and finally this week it did. So as you know, last week I mentioned that this was a level to look at. I got short and my stop loss was around 113, I think somewhere around here. Not yet stopped out, but very, very close. I do not know whether I'll get stopped out, but my stop loss is down there and I just leave it as it is. I don't like to meddle with my stops. I don't like to micromanage my trades. I just leave it as it is. And if the market does take me out, then so be it. Take the loss and move on. So this is a chart of the euro dollar, definitely showing strength in the market. And I would say previous resistance could potentially act as support. So if price does come back and retest down here, this would be a level I would say price action traders will look for. So just to share with you on euro dollar. So now to get a better view, let's look at Aussie dollar. So looking at Aussie dollar, this is the weekly chart, and you notice that this week price formed a pin bar, right, at this resistance over here. So if Aussie dollar formed this pin bar, it's telling you that the Aussie has depreciated this week. That means the US dollar is actually going up. That's why we saw this pin bar over here. We saw this pin bar over here because the USD is actually strengthening against the Aussie dollar over the last few days. That's why you see this rejection. Let me explain it once more, okay? Pin bar basically shows rejection in the market, right? So this is where price traded up to a high of this high over here. Then price drive it all the way back down lower and finally closing here. So what the pin bar simply shows on the chart is just rejection. So this is showing rejection of higher prices for the Aussie. That is why you can conclude that the US dollar actually did strengthen over the last few days against the Aussie dollar. So we see this pin bar against the resistance. So something to take note of. And for traders who are looking to trade pin bar, this is a weekly pin bar and it's something that you can consider. So looking next, this is the pound dollar. Again, same story as the Aussie dollar. We see USD strength over the last few days against the pound dollar. This is the weekly chart, so we see rejection on the weekly chart as well. And let's look at the New Zealand dollar weekly. Again, we see similar story. Rejection on the weekly chart against the US dollar. And if you realize, the only currency that's not rejecting, I would say, that is appreciating against the US dollar is actually the euro dollar. You look at the euro dollar weekly, you see a strong bullish upside move over here. As compared to the Aussie, the pound, and the New Zealand, we saw the US dollar was actually appreciating against those currencies, except the euro dollar. So that's why I'm trying to explain, you can't just, be careful when you look at the dollar index and you think that the dollar is actually weakening, because it is heavily skewed and biased because of the heavy weightage in euro. That is why I would say you need to be careful when you use the dollar index for your trades. Because if you look at the other currencies, right, those that are not so heavily weighted, like the Aussie, the New Zealand, and the British pound, it may give you a different picture altogether. So this is something to share with you and to understand as well. So lastly, let's look at the dollar yen. Dollar yen weekly chart. Pretty interesting, right? This is actually the standout among the other currencies because let's look at it historically. We notice this strong impulse move higher. Then we had this consolidation for quite a decent period of time. This is about, I would say, based on my guesstimation, this is about 6 to 8 months. Then we had this weak rally. Then price went to a slipping mode once more for about maybe 8 months to a year. Then finally it broke out the range, retraced, and finally break out once more. And from the looks of it, once again, price seems to be ranging on the weekly chart as well. So there is a very good possibility that price could actually trade higher in the coming weeks. So this is actually on my radar. And looking at the daily chart, right, you see that there is actually, I would say, bullish momentum on the background, right? You notice this was a previous key support level with this resistance over here. Then price traded into the support, bounced off and traded higher, retested this previous resistance over here. Then price traded lower. But when it traded lower, it did not even go back to retest this support over here. Instead, what did it do? Price formed a new support over here. So there is strength in the background, right? It's telling you that bulls are in control. It's having a higher lows here, here, and here in this cluster of zone as well. So there is higher lows in the market, and price is currently, I would say, having a resistance of 122 over here. So very interesting to look at because I myself personally anticipate a breakout towards the upside. Whether the breakout will be a legitimate breakout or false breakout, I do not know. But I suspect that there are cluster of stops above this resistance here and here, and there is incentive for price to actually go above to trigger those stops. So that will be something interesting to look at and to watch this particular pair as well. So okay, I'm not going any more into the other different products because honestly, I find that markets like this price actually actually pretty choppy, and I don't really see much other potential trading opportunities as of now. So this week I just share with you my take on the dollar, and to actually be careful about using the dollar index. It's not that you can't use it, but when you do use the dollar index for reference, do understand that, like I've said earlier, the euro is heavily weighted with 57% weightage in it. So just because sometimes you see the dollar index slumping, it does not mean that it is really weak, because you still need to look at it across the other currency pairs, alright? Especially those that are not heavily weighted in the dollar index itself. So that's all I have for you guys this week. And also lastly, I'll say thank you for all the comments and all the questions you leave for the upcoming webinar. I'll be sure to actually try answer those questions, as many as I can. And I'll talk to you guys soon, alright? So stay safe, stay cool, and good luck and good trading.